This video will deal with domesticated pigs and their wild relatives. Unfortunately, domesticated pigs have a lot of wild relatives and we just don't have time to deal with all of them. So we're going to be talking about Eurasian wild boars and feral pigs in North America. Today's domesticated pigs were descended from Eurasian wild boars in two separate domestication events, one in Asia and one in Europe, as far as scientists can tell. There are some genetics that they're not so sure about. It doesn't trace back neatly. There's still a lot of work being done. But basically, when we look at the Eurasian wild boar, we can say that this is the ancestor of today's pink, cuddly barnyard pigs as we see in Charlotte's Web. Eurasian wild boar originated in Europe and Asia, as you can tell from the name, but now inhabit every continent except for Antarctica. They live in sounders, that's a group of wild boar, made up of 6 to 20 adult females who are related, and all of their piglets. So a single sounder can get up to, about 100 individuals, and when the sounder gets too big, they might split off into subpopulations. The males live with their mothers until they're fully grown, and then leave the sounder and mostly live on their own unless it's time for mating, and then they find a sounder and join it for a while. The females will have 5 or 6 piglets to a litter, although not all of them will survive. Eurasian wild boar as adults will weigh anywhere from 145 pounds to nearly 600 pounds. I personally did not realize they got that big. That's pretty big. Wild boar are omnivorous, so they'll eat both plants and animals, and they'll just sort of adjust their eating habits to what's available. So they will hunt small animals, even young deer, lambs, even small calves, which of course is a bit of a problem for farmers, but that is just their natural role in the ecosystem. Now, talking about the natural role of an animal in its native ecosystem, that's one thing. But if we're going to talk about feral pigs in North America, that is quite another issue. You see, pigs are not native to North America, and so they do cause problems when they get into the ecosystem here. For one, they'll root up and destroy ecosystems. They start predating other animals and changing the landscape, and it really does become a problem. Now, how did feral pigs get to North America? Well, there's a couple of paths. Of course, there are pigs that came over as farm animals and then maybe escaped. That's one type of feral pig. The other type is actually the Eurasian wild boar, and those were brought over in Alberta in the 80s and 90s, and in other places as well. They were brought in as a way to diversify agriculture. What happened was that game farms were becoming a thing, so people were raising, for example, elk, which still happens, and then selling them so that people could hunt them. And they thought, well, why don't we do this with wild boar too? Wild boar hunting is a thing in Europe. Why don't we do it over here in North America? And so they brought these Eurasian wild boar over, and some escaped. And now they are wild boar at large or feral pigs, depending on who you talk to. Different names, same thing. And that becomes a real problem, as I was saying, when they start disrupting the natural ecosystems. As you can see here, wild boar really can do a lot of damage to the land and also to crops. They'll flatten crops, they'll root in the soil, which is just a natural behavior that they perform. This is how they get some of their food. It's very good for their natural ecosystem, but as you can see, it really tears up the ground. They'll even root up small trees, and I don't know about you, but I certainly wouldn't want to be trying to harvest flattened crops, never mind driving across a field that's all tore up like that. I would destroy my equipment if I tried to do that. And these are the major issues that farmers in Alberta are having, is the tearing up of the land and the destruction of crops. Never mind the fact that sometimes they'll just, predate a young animal and take away that farmer's livestock because there's an opportunity for food there. Because wild boar at large are so destructive to agricultural land and crops and also to the natural ecosystem, there are efforts in place in Alberta and in other provinces and down in the States to get rid of them. These are an invasive species. They are not a native species that is supposed to be here to fill a certain ecological role. They are invasive, and they are classified as pests in Alberta. So the Alberta government has classified them as pests, and then if we come over to the Alberta Invasive Species Council webpage, you can see there is a Squeal on Pigs campaign that is encouraging farmers or anyone else who sees these wild boar at large to report them. And what they want to happen is that they want to send in the eradication team, and they'll set up traps that they can trap the entire sounder at once and euthanize it. In the past, we've tried hunting. There have been bounties on these wild boar at large, and it doesn't work. You can't just hunt them into an eradicated state because they're so smart. I don't know if you've heard that pigs are smart, but Eurasian wild boar, because they live in the wild and they have not been domesticated, they're just that much smarter. And if you shoot one wild boar, the rest will learn that, hey, our friend just died, maybe we should change our behavior and not be where humans are. They will go so far as to becoming exclusively nocturnal. The sounders will split into smaller sounders. They will pass information on to future generations of how to avoid being hunted, and so hunting actually exacerbates the problem. So they're trying to eradicate them by capturing the entire sounder and euthanizing them. I realize that sounds cruel, but again, these are invasive species. They're not meant to be here. They escaped. That was never supposed to happen. And it's now a very real ecological and economic problem. And so we do have to get rid of them. And so there are efforts in place to do that.